at our work, and we're doing this from work. This is a chance that we could both be together, and I could show him how the GoToMeeting works. We're excited about not just this session, but also kind of what's coming after it. Even though this is like we're going to stand down our normal GoToMeetings for the summer. Some of you have been, I think, have interviewed for jobs at Northrop Grumman as part of the CyberPatriot program, internship program. And we're excited. I'm fairly certain at least one or two of you are going to make it and be part of the Northrop Grumman for a 10-week session. And both Mr. Rodriguez and I are going to be involved in that. And so that's going to be really exciting. We're hoping we're going to take whatever we learned from that and bring it forward to you guys. So good luck to you all that applied, and I hope you make it. I was just about to suggest, Ms. Wood, can you start recording if you haven't already?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay,
Hello?
so this is part 2 of the session on common vulnerabilities and exploits, or what we call CVEs. And so I'll just get going right into it. And Ms. Rodriguez will go ahead, and I'll jump in as needed.
All right. Okay, so to review, as I know it's been a couple weeks since we last discussed this topic, but if you remember in our previous discussion that CVEs document specific vulnerabilities. They describe the nature of the vulnerability. They specify the identified risks to the machine or platform that's affected. Also identify what platforms are affected, and in some cases recommend mitigations. And if you recall, also we discussed how that is a national database that's maintained by MITRE, and we shared some links that you could go to look up CVEs, and we actually went ahead and practiced on a couple CVE numbers just to see if you could find the information. And some of you also discovered that if you put a CVE into Google, you're going to be able to find it as well. It'll take you right to that vulnerability. So if we go on to the next page.
Okay.
So as a security practitioner, it's not enough to just know that there's a collection of vulnerabilities somewhere. It really becomes an issue of how do you apply that to your environment. As a practitioner, you're going to be interested in identifying what devices are on your networks, how your networks are impacted by those devices. And remember, devices also aren't just compute devices. They could be routers, they could be switches, they could be firewalls, tablets in wireless world, cell phones. It can be any number of different things. So your exposure, your risk exposure gets quite big depending on the type of networks that you're on. So it becomes important to have a way to manage and understand what your risk is.
I would just have a question just to stimulate some thought for the crowd. So can anyone suggest any network devices in your house that are not listed here that you might count? Go ahead and answer in the chat window. Someone said modems. Does anybody have, you mean like a, not a modem in the traditional sense, I guess. TVs, yeah, so TV, Lando says TV. What do you mean by TV, Lando? Why would it be a network device? Yeah, Mrs. Wood got it. My smart TV, yeah, that's a network device.
Yep.
Yeah, it's connected to the internet. I want to hear, Okay, house alarm.
So that's a key right there. If it accesses the internet in any way, shape, or form, it's probably touching your network. So what other devices do you think might also be considered?
Okay, phones. Yeah, the phones are when you're on your Wi-Fi for sure. Yeah, oh, there's the Internet of Things. That's very good. IoT, Lando pointing that out. Microwave, I don't know. Do you have a smart microwave? Do you have a microwave that talks to the internet? Smart fridge, Lando. We have a smart fridge at our house, and our fridge is connected into the internet, which kind of scares me sometimes because I don't know how good the security is with that thing, but right now I'm taking a risk. Anyone else? There's a lot of people silent out there. You think you got all the ideas?
Do any of you watch Netflix?
Hannah watching Netflix.
Okay. How do you watch Netflix?
Mrs. Wood says, I know you all do. Yeah, on a laptop, on a computer, right? That's obvious.
Do you print anything out at home?
Printer.
There you go.
And believe it or not, there's some notoriously bad security printers out there. Just think about that for a moment. Gaming system,
Very
Xbox
good.
or PlayStation, yep.
Very good.
Okay.
So as you all are kind of getting a feel for it, basically one of the key things there is was previously mentioned, Internet of Things, right? So that pretty much means anything. There's a whole host of devices out there that fall into that category. Printers, gaming machines, DVD players, TV, internet TV boxes like Apple TV, Roku, Chrome, smart TVs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's even crazy things like smart toasters and smart light bulbs, and you name it. There's there's all sorts of internet devices out there. So just in your home, that's what you've got. Now, granted, many of those things don't necessarily translate into devices you'll find in a business, but as you can see, you can get an idea of how many types of how wide and varied the problem really becomes when you get into an enterprise situation. So really, you have a need for tools in order to manage this. You need something that's going to help you identify how many devices out there on your network are affected by these exploits, and hopefully point out which ones are the biggest issues and point out which exploits you need to be focused on. So in this particular case, as you can see if you're reading the slide there, one such tool is called OpenVAS. Open as in free, open availability. It's vulnerability assessment
system.
Right. So you have there's commercial versions of it, and then there's also the commercial Nessus product, which is also very similar to, actually they come from the same roots. So we can kind of move on from here. So OpenVAS is going to do things like test for known vulnerabilities. First, what it does is it goes out there and it actually builds and maintains a database of vulnerabilities from all of these well-known repositories we talked about in the last session. So it goes out there and it pulls down the CVE repository, it pulls down from other locations that have additional information and vulnerabilities, and uses those databases to test against the devices it finds on your network. So it can be used to perform penetration testing on multiple devices at once. So you can tell it to go and check an entire network, and it'll go out and scan the entire network for anything it can find.
So I want to ask a question to the group. What do you think penetration testing is, or what it means? Go ahead and answer to the chat. Someone who hasn't replied yet before. Should I pick someone at random? Okay, Landis is trying to get through a security feature. Finding flaws in the security, testing the computer for vulnerabilities. I'm looking for a particular word or a way of describing this. Definitely it's testing the security, but what is it? Trying to find flaws is good, but I'll wait for a couple more and then I'll give you what I'm getting at. So actually, penetration testing means actually trying to get through the security features and break in. So you're penetrating the system, you're getting on the other side. And that term is actually used for systems where they get ethical hackers to come and try to find out the vulnerabilities in a system. And they don't just, give them some, some potential possible ways that things could get in. They actually break in. And yeah, and so there's someone who said white hat hacking. They actually show that they can break in by doing it. So they break in. So the OpenVAS tool is an example of a way of doing penetration testing. It actually has some features in it that can show that you actually have the vulnerability.
So on the subject of ethical hacking and that Mr. Bush was bringing up here, so there's a specific purpose for the penetration testing software like Nessus and OpenVAS, right? So once you've already identified the networks and you already have access to the networks and you know that there's stuff out there, you want to be able to identify, once you're connected to that network, you want to be able to identify what vulnerabilities there are so that you can apply specific exploits in order to get various levels of control on that network and do different type of harm depending on what device you're on and what exploits you're dealing with. So from a white hat perspective, using these tools like OpenVAS and Nessus point out where those holes are that your typical black hat type person would be trying to exploit for their own purposes. So this allows you to go through and test an entire network for one, and be able to go through an entire network, test each device, and identify any vulnerabilities. And it also produces actionable reports identifying the vulnerabilities that were found, and in a lot of cases also gives you mitigation steps to help you work through the process of fixing the vulnerabilities. And of course, another important thing when you're dealing with security here is a way to measure or assess or score the risk that each device, that the vulnerabilities have on each device, because you really want to start with the most vulnerable and work your way down. So, Mr. Bush, you want to talk about the report here that you see?
Yeah, so this is an example of an output from an OpenVAS report, and we actually have Mr. Rodriguez ran OpenVAS, and we have some actual reports. So should I click on get those ones up?
Yeah, you can go.
Okay, so this is just in the presentation, but I'm going to get out of the presentation here for a second and go back to the Google Drive vulnerability assessment. There's which one should I?
Just go with the Windows. So
okay.
That's the most interesting one anyway.
All right, so old Windows. So Mr. Rodriguez had an old virtual machine that from before, and he decided to try and run this and see what would happen. So let's open it up. So these are out in the Google Drive. You can take a look at them. Okay. So there's a summary here, and it gives you, of course, how the report was run, and some details about the host IP address and the start, and what was logged. But I think you pretty much start to zero in on something right here, this item that's high in red. So it's got a score of a 7.5, and as we scroll down, and it identifies the a name, and is that the
so it's actually identifying the actual vulnerability. But when you go down further, they'll give you the CVE, so you can go back and look it up.
There it is, the CVE.
But if you know, as you notice below that, you have a summary that actually gives you kind of an idea of what this vulnerability does. So in this particular case, saying it's running SMB or NetBIOS, and it's prone to authentication bypass vulnerabilities. Gives you some information about the impact that's going to have, and tells you, as far as a solution, what type of solution options you have. In this particular case, it's an old version of Windows, so there is no fix. There was no future updates for this version of Windows. So based on the finding of when the vulnerability was found, there will be no fix for it. So you have to do something else to try and protect this machine from being affected by this vulnerability.
So Lando asked, could this be potentially used in a competition? You mean running the tool, the OpenVOS tool?
Probably not, is my guess, because it's actually something that's going to be run within a separate system that would have to actually, so you'd be running a separate server that would then, you would turn it loose on your VM and have it assess your VM for vulnerabilities. Now, what it can help you with is, as you're going through your practice and trying to harden your machines and learn the best practices, you can use this tool to kind of see how well you're doing. And we got some exercises and for future sessions that we hope to be able to do this with you guys.
And I just want to point out too, that option, the thing that says will not fix, and you see these old versions of operating systems. So, typically the older systems do get they get to a point where they're called end of life, and they're not supported anymore. And so that's just a risk that happens about not moving forward with your different operating systems, and it happens. Scrolling down, you see, I think this is organized actually in level of severity. So then there's another one that's a 5.0. And these logs are out there. You can look at them. They're in the folders actually. It's called, from the top level, it's called Vulnerability Assessment. And the briefing, last week's briefing is Intro to CVEs Part 1, and we're doing Part 2 today. I think it'd be good to show you this other one, though, the Amazon Fire Stick analysis. So I'm going to open that up. So that's the Amazon Fire Stick is an idea of another internet device that maybe you would have not thought about. And it is also a network device, and there is a way to assess its vulnerabilities. Now, in this case, there wasn't anything too highly evil in this one, so that's good.
They're doing a good job.
Thanks, Amazon.
In protecting us, yeah.
See, is there more to go on the charts?
Well, so the charts, when you go through the charts, it's going to be mostly describing what we just did right now. Going back to the.
Oh, we were going to go to the demo tool, right?
So let's go back to the old Windows one real quick
Okay.
here. Okay. So now one of the things that I wanted to point out is if you move down a little bit here, you see there's a references section, which is going to give you some references to where you can find this vulnerability. Sometimes, if it's something that's found in the CVE database, you'll see that. If it's something found as in this particular case, that's something that's described in an RFC, which you'd find in the IETF libraries, right, standards. So sometimes a vulnerability isn't necessarily an exploit. It could be, well, obviously they're exploits, but it's not necessarily a bug per se. It's maybe not when the manufacturer doesn't necessarily follow the written standards to the word, and then sometimes it's also mistakes in the standard itself, which you would generally see as a CVE.
So just to show you this next one here, this medium one, you can see that what it's describing as a vulnerability is actually providing information that someone shouldn't have. And Ms. Wood, we'll get to your question on jailbreaking. But in this case, we're showing like you can actually find by doing certain query, you can find what's running on a system, and that's called information leaking. Information leaking is when people can use information to either find other vulnerabilities or know more about the system that they're trying to break into. And so you want to cover up as much of those, the information leakage as you can, because there may be a known vulnerability against a certain type of system, and you certainly don't want to make that well known. So as you get into more of the information leakage kinds of things, they tend to be less bad just because there's not necessarily a way to exploit that. Ms. Wood asked about jailbreaking a device, and I could comment on that, or do you?
Well, in general, jailbreaking or rooting a machine is going to basically open up your machine to allow for elevated level of permissions on that system. So the obvious potential bad outcome of that is once you've opened up and elevated your permissions on that machine, the chances of software doing very bad things to your machine go up dramatically.
Yeah, and I think the classic example of the jailbreak is the Apple iPhones. They find a weakness, and then like normally you have to buy software through the Apple Store. You can't install whatever you want. It has to be, and all the software is checked and verified that is a valid, that is valid and everything, and that provides a certain level of protection. But when you jailbreak your phone, you basically take down all your protections and you allow to install whatever you want on it. Of course, if you install some evil software, then the evil travels with you. So it's people do it to be able to either install things that they don't have or want to use the phone in ways that are not sanctioned by the Apple. But when you do that, you also open yourself up to a lot of vulnerabilities.
Right. So basically, every one of these machines, your cell phones and your tablets and what have you, are full-fledged computers running Linux variants or Unix type variants in the case of Apple. And everything that you see inside that screen and your normal touch and feel form function is contained inside a sandboxed shell. Part of the process of jailbreaking, you're actually going and breaking out of this limited permission shell or sandbox and trying to get down to the core or the root of your machine where you can do things with elevated permissions. So
there's a question from Mrs. Wood, and I'll try to answer it, and then Mr. Rodriguez maybe can too. the question is in the text message, can we do a general definition of encryption, and should we be using it on a regular basis? So general definition of encryption is basically where you, and I'm going to start with really general, but basically that you take information and you scramble it, and then you have a way of unscrambling it for the person who is allowed. And so what happens is in fact, on the iPhone, when you lock your screen, the information inside the phone does get scrambled. And they do that because they don't want someone who finds your phone to be able to access all your contacts and everything else, whatever might be in the phone, unless it's unlocked first. So that's a form of encryption. And, you know, in terms of encryption, it is a security feature. So definitely for things that you want to keep secure, like passwords, or when you're actually using a secure website, an HTTPS site, the network traffic is encrypted. That is one of the features that protects you online, is encryption. Do you want to add to any of that, Mr. Rodriguez?
Yeah, so it's basically what Mr. Bush said, right? So you understand it's all key-based encryption, and as long as you hold the key, you can encrypt and decrypt that information, right? So what that's called is encryption at rest, is what Mr. Bush was talking about, where all the information on your cell phone, for example, is encrypted when your cell phone is locked. It's encrypted at rest. Now, encryption during transit is when you're actually communicating with another machine remotely using HTTPS or any other type of system that supports SSL or some other form of encryption. Now you're taking that data and you're encrypting it as you send it across the wires. And both are important for different reasons. And primarily it's keeping your private information private.
Something I want to mention is that, like, we talked about text message. What's interesting is if you use the Apple iMessage on your phone, that's when it turns blue and you're going between two different Apple devices. That is actually encrypted. But when you send a text message under a normal text and going maybe to another device, that's using the text messaging system, and that is not encrypted. So what that means is, along the way, if someone wanted to try and pick up your message, they could potentially read what you sent. So that's an example of encryption and non-encryption.
So you want to bring up?
Yeah, where's the site? So it's openvos.
Right.
Okay. So I'll try and let Mr. Rodriguez drive here. Maybe that'll work. Openvos.org.
Yep. And then go to the live demo.
Okay, live demo.
Try out at the top.
Try out.
No, let's see, where is it? We were just looking at it. There you go, live demo under. There you go.
And login is live demo with password live demo. All right. Not very good password. All right. So this looks a lot like the software that Mr. Rodriguez used to run his little test, and that we may, when we're, as a group, we may be running against our own virtual machines. And I don't know, you want to?
So there's not a lot to speak about here, really. So this is just kind of giving you an assessment, giving you an example of if you were using this as a security practitioner and you have a network with many machines on it. It gives you an idea of how to use this tool to assess what your risk is. And as you can see right there, Mr. Bush clicked on the highest risk item on the first dashboard, and now you're getting a list of all of the risks that are available that are present in your network today, or in this demo network.
So this is like by running a scan. So somehow it was able to figure out that the default password, what's happening now for Insight account was never reset. So there's probably a database of default passwords that it checks and for typical devices and sees.
Well, it'll actually do brute force attacks against your password databases. So, yeah, I know you guys went through some of the brute force and dictionary attacks with Mr. Bush previously. This tool actually uses some of those databases and tries to guess what the passwords might be through brute force methods and dictionary methods. So if you have admin accounts or protected accounts that have bad passwords, it'll certainly try to identify those for you.
So you can go to this site yourself, the openvaz.org, and check it out and get an idea for what it does. And then I think, is this where you were able to download the software also?
Right.
So if you, the software that Mr. Rodriguez downloaded was for Linux. So if you create a virtual machine with Linux, you could potentially try to install this. He advised me that, it wasn't like just click and go. There was things that didn't quite work right, and you had to research it and so forth. So it's definitely not something that, the average person is going to be able to do.
Yeah, it's not ridiculously hard to install, but you're don't expect to be able to click one button and have it up and running right away. So you may have to do a few things. But the key is that a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's an open source software product, right? So
yep.
It's not as clean and polished as the commercial products you might be used to. But one of the key things there is, if you look on this page here, Mr. Bush brought up some of the CVEs, and you can see some pretty recent CVEs that it's identified. One of Mr. Bush's favorite ones is the first one that came up. So if you go back and look at the description, stack-based buffer overflow.
Yep, buffer overflow and an address from string, and one of those probably a string copy.
Yep.
Which is the example that we used from that one session on types of threats and vulnerabilities. So I think that was pretty much what we wanted to share with you today. And do we have any more just general questions in the chat? I don't see any more questions coming.
So does everybody see how this could benefit your life as a security person? How is this important to understand? Why is it important to understand this stuff when it comes to cyber patriots?
I think they all fell asleep.
Not even any crickets awake out there?
Yeah, crickets. Hello. All right, well, we should pick on somebody. All right, I'm getting ready to pick on somebody. Oh, somebody joined in. For the website, are there any more features that can be used for checking security? So this website that we showed you, it was, demoing the actual software. So you need to download and install the software. And there definitely, go ahead and you should just go and take a look at the different things that it does just to get a sense. But you can see the different types of scans that it runs. You can put in your whole network. Mr. Rodriguez and I were talking about, actually, for me, just wanting to run it against my home network and see if my fridge has a problem, see, if my televisions that are hooked up have any issues, you know, all that stuff, just to kind of get a sense for, well, what is the average, what, you know, how am I doing as someone who's a little bit more aware of these things? How does my home look like in terms of vulnerabilities?
So the key here is understanding what this tool, or where this tool fits in your tool belt, in your tool bag, right? So it's a penetration tester. Again, so that means you're going back and you're using this tool to figure a way to break through the security features of a specific device. And then once you've broken through, be able to identify what vulnerability allowed you to do that. So as far as this demo, the demo here is actually showing you, the reason why we chose to use this demo is it gives you an example of what what it would look like if you had a whole bunch of different devices out there that you were going through and exploring and running penetration tests on. The only difference that you don't see here in this demo that you would in a live version of the product is you'd be able to go and specifically give IP addresses or create tell it information about new hosts and allow it to penetration test those hosts.
So, Mrs. Wood, do you have any parting words before we close out the session? And
this was very informative. I really do appreciate what we were talking about today. Does anyone else have any other questions, generalized questions? I know some of you have been texting me questions tonight, so I appreciate that. Thank you. But anyone else have any questions? I know this is going to be our last session until August, so ask them now.
Yeah, I need fruit. Can I have apple and strawberries?
apple and strawberries, yes. So, Ms. Wood, can you save off the recorded session and the chat window so we can have a record of that? And then I think we'll just